Hey y'all, Zelda here. I am here to do a little video. This is a question that I get asked a lot. The main videos that I've done so far here on YouTube are my week ahead tarot reading videos, where I show you 3 different crystal skulls and then you pick the one that you're feeling really called to, and then you skip ahead to that part of the video so you can get your personalized card reading. And a lot of people that have engaged, or who maybe follow me on Instagram, or who I even know, who are getting newly drawn or feeling connected to crystal skulls, the question they ask me is, how do you connect? How do you connect with your crystal skulls? How do you bond with them? How do you build a relationship? And so one of the first things that feels really important to name is that different people have different theories on the use and the relevance of crystal skulls. This is not going to be an in-depth history. I'm not going to be arguing with other people's perspectives, but just so that you kind of know where I'm coming from with sharing this, and then you can decide if it feels relevant for you or not, is that I am talking about a crystal skull as any skull that is carved from stone or resin, anything carved, but also could be applied to other forms of carving. This is an eagle carving. I have this dragon skull carving. So it could be any type of skull carving or carving that you want to connect and bond with. That's gonna be what this is. And the way that I work with them, a crystal skull or a crystal carving is like an anchor or a point of contact for you with your guides. And so it is a place where you can communicate and receive information. And in addition to that, you also have the kind of, properties of the stone itself. This is not going to speak to any of those properties, physical or metaphysical properties. That's something you can look into on your own, or even if you don't feel called to that part of working with crystal skulls, that's totally fine, right? This could be a resin carved skull too. So that's the first piece, is that in order to know what you're connecting with, this is using a crystal skull as a way to connect with a guide. Some people don't need to be looking up how to connect with their crystal skulls because they buy them because they like the way skulls look and they have them as decoration in their home. That can be really magical too. This is not a judgment on that. This is just how I connect and bond with my crystal skulls and with my guides, because that's truly what that feels like it's about to me. That's the most sacred part of working with crystal skulls to me, is getting to work and have almost like an altar or a space to connect with them and to form a deeper relationship that impacts my life. So these are my 3 favorite ways, and if you have different ones, I'd love to hear about them. There are as many ways to connect with your guides and with your skulls as there are people in the world, and so these are certainly just 3 ways that I found are helpful. I will say one thing I did not put on this list that I think is important to name why is meditating. Meditating with your skulls is an awesome way, and meditating in general is an awesome way to connect with your guides. But for people who are new to connecting with spirit, to being present with themselves, who've maybe experienced stress, or trauma in their life, or who are neurodivergent in terms of having ADHD or anxiety or autism or any of these other things, it can make meditating, in terms of just sitting still and being there with your thoughts, it can make it feel really intimidating. And it also is you can learn how to participate in meditation and mindfulness if you want, but I also think that there are other ways that are still mindful. I mean, it still involves being present, but it's less in a form of stillness. And so these 3 different ways are not necessarily a substitute. I do think that finding a way that you can meditate will enhance your practice with your skulls or with your guides. or just with yourself. But if that's not something that is accessible to you, that was not accessible to me for a very long time, even though I actually had a practice of mindfulness and meditation. So no judgment. It is really important to start where you're at with these things. So that's why that's not number one on the list. So the actual number one of this list is taking a bath or a shower with your skull. If you are like me, you got interested in crystal skulls and then maybe like got obsessed in some way, or it became a special interest for you and maybe you acquired a bunch of them or more than one of them. If not, that's fine. This doesn't have to apply to you. But for me, because I accumulated a couple of them, I also had to figure out a way to like focus and concentrate my energy onto just one of them at a time so I could really build a relationship. For me, taking a bath is something that feels really nourishing, but also taking a shower can just be something functional. And one of the things I like about this is that it creates a container for you to be with just yourself and one skull. You usually don't have a bunch of other skulls. If you do in your bathroom, that could be like an invitation to maybe like have just one at a time, just for this particular practice. And so I will sometimes have one that seems to really call to me. This could be a skull that like you just got, like the same day that you got it, versus like it could be a skull that you already know the name of, that you've like worked with for a long time. I think it can be a helpful practice for either of those. And so picking it, you will kind of pick it and bring it, and you can just set it in the shower. You can hold it if you're in the bath. Make sure it's a water-safe crystal if you're gonna bring it into the bathtub or into the shower. Like I wouldn't bring pyrite or selenite, like things that aren't water safe. So you can do a quick Google search, make sure that the thing your skull is carved of or your carving is carved from is safe to be exposed to steam or water. So that's the practice. Is the invitation is like you have whatever you're doing to kind of clean your body. You can quiet your mind. It's kind of a contained time period. And it also generally creates a little bit more of like this closed loop where like you are intentionally like removing these layers to kind of cleanse and remove these different, I don't know, like layers of preconception or like exposure or connection to the outside world, and can then forge this kind of bond. And sometimes you might just go through your business in the shower and then like come out and be like, okay, well, I didn't really receive anything. And fine, that's still building a relationship. But sometimes you may notice that you have a thought and then it connects to the skull, or that you hear a name, or that you have an image, or that you have some realization that comes up for you. And it can be helpful because in that container, you only have that one influence with you, going on with you, is that one skull or that one being or that carving, right? And so it gives you an opportunity to kind of see your experience in relationship to that being. So that's number one, is taking a bath or a shower with your skull. Number two is going for a walk with your skull. And it's a very similar idea that you would pick your skull or your carving, and you would pick one obviously that you can bring with you. I mean, you can bring bigger ones, but like this one's not gonna fit like comfortably in a pocket. I mean, that's not really where my pocket is, like down there, but you know, this one, you know, some people have much smaller ones. I will bring like larger skulls. Like this one has gone for some walks with me. I know it's a little bit large, but I can kind of like hold it in my pocket, or I sometimes will bring like a bag that has like a little pouch that's padded in it. If it becomes a practice that you really love, you can kind of build and structure that for yourself. But I oftentimes would think that like I go on this very similar walk very consistently or regularly. It's like a 20-minute walk. I really like it. And I really would like this practice of picking out a skull to bring with me, whether that is a new skull that I'm connecting with or a skull that I feel like is calling my attention. And it's almost like I'm going for a walk with a friend. right? Like we're meeting up, or I'm going for a walk with someone new, right? And there's something to titrate or pull your attention back and forth. So like you're looking around, and there's a lot more stimulation in this type of container than there is in like a bath or a shower per se, right? In a bath or a shower, it's removing a lot of the stimulation or the external sources. In a walk, there's a lot more exposure. You might see an animal that flies by that feels symbolic, or you might see, kids playing on the playground that like inspires a thought, or you might have a thought or overhear a bit of a conversation that feels like auditorily like you are receiving messages. So there's a lot more exposure to that kind of way of interacting with spirit. It's also a container, right? Where you're not in your home, if you have more than one skull, like trying to figure out which is coming from which, and it gives you a little bit of like a practice of being present. And just like with the bath or the shower and the other one that I will suggest, if you don't feel like a lot comes up, that's not a failure, right? We cannot expect ourselves to be able to immediately have a connection. Spirit is not Google. It's not on demand for us. Our connection to spirit or to the collective unconscious, or like or to nature, like this experience, or to God if you prefer, right? This connection is not something that is intended to be like a one-way street where we just like say, hey, I want this thing, and it just like drops into our lap. And that I think is very confusing. It doesn't fit as well into our capitalist framework that's very extractive, very like formulaic almost in how to get something out of a relationship. This is really a practice of presence, a practice of devotion, a practice of like genuine relationship building. And so there's going to be moments where it feels like a little one-sided maybe, where like you're putting a lot out there and trying to receive messages and not receiving anything. And then one day maybe it will come through really clearly, right? And once you have that, you can use that information in terms of like, say a name comes through really clearly. You can use that to build more and build another deeper connection from there. So that's the second one, is going for a walk with your crystal skull. And then the third one is pulling cards or doing some form of divination to connect with your skull. This can be really helpful. I will say, if you connect with tarot, if you've watched any of my other videos, most of them are like tarot and oracle cards. So like I love divination as a way to communicate with the divine, but it does feel like as an entry point, sometimes tarot is a little inaccessible. It's almost like you have to learn the language of tarot to feel like it's as impactful. And so there is a bit of a learning curve, I think, with that. You can use them. I don't think that you have to do that. I think someone getting a deck and opening it and using it essentially like an oracle deck, where you just kind of like let what arises come to you. But I think there's a lot of like, looking up and seeing how it relates. And I wouldn't recommend something like that as much for communicating with your crystal skulls when you're building a relationship, because it's very cognitive, right? If you're looking things up and cross-referencing and seeing what feels like it applies from there, and then you're like, did I make that? It just is like a whole process that I think can be a little like challenging or a little clunky when you're first connecting with a guide or deepening a bond, that can add to the level of like insecurity or uncertainty. So if you do already read tarot, tarot can be amazing, but I'm sure you kind of know that if you already read tarot. But oracle cards are a little bit different, or even like the other option that I was going to offer, if you don't have any decks already, because I don't think you need to buy anything to connect with your guides, is like bibliomancy. So connecting through books. And so let's start with oracle cards or tarot cards, right? I prefer to, I have a lot of clairsentience as well as other kind of clair abilities. And so I feel like heat or warmth or like almost like an electric pulse. Like, so if I put out a bunch of tarot cards, I will like put my hand over it to kind of like feel for one. If that feels like it works for you, clairsentience does tend to be the most common clair gift. A lot of people have like impulses in their body. I would say most people have that capacity. That's not like something I'm citing from somewhere. That's just something through my experience that I've noticed. But you can also do it like just cutting a deck, right? And then pulling a card and seeing what comes up for you. You might ask your skull a question, right? Or your guide a question like, what work are we doing together? Or what's a way that you like to connect with me? Or how, like even asking a question if you already know your guide, right? You can use this as a way to kind of ask and engage with questions. And if you get a card that you don't understand, I really recommend like pulling a clarifier card. Like this says trust on it. It's hard to see because it's focusing on my face, but it says trust down here. And so for trust, if I was like, trust, I don't really understand. Trust, can you clarify, or trust in what? And then I pull another card and it says spirit. So trust in spirit. That feels like a lot more clear. Or since these are really abstract, I might pay attention to just the colors or how those influence what interpretations I have of those colors. If you don't have any cards or any like divination tools, like you could also do this with any form of divination, like dice, playing cards if you use those as a form of psychomancy, scrying, you can use any of those, but this is like for people who are starting to connect or wanting to deepen that. And I don't want you to feel like you have to go acquire a bunch of things. I think that's very like part of spirituality is like this like acquisition process, which I like love, but I also like need to check that part of myself a lot of times to like make sure that I'm not like being overly spiritually materialistic or something, right? So most people have a book in their house, or you could even do this with your own journal if you don't have a book. But I'm gonna make the assumption that most people have a book in their home, right? And so going to your shelf and just kind of like asking a question, or you could leave it open-ended. You could say like, what's something that would be a supportive guiding sentiment for me right now? What's a message that I need to hear? Pulling a book from your shelf, or if you have a book that's out, kind of like flipping through it until you feel some sort of message or guidance to stop. And then reading the part that your eyes land on and using that as a form of its own oracle. This is like bibliomancy, right? Where you are using what is available to you as a conversational tool, as a language that you can speak to the divine with. I recommend before you start that practice of figuring out what questions you want to ask, or if you want to leave it open-ended, you can start and then kind of like recenter, right? Start and then say like, instead of like pulling like 8 cards and then being like, how does that connect? If your brain works that way and you're already doing that, please continue doing that. This is not a judgment if that's a practice. I just think that can be a temptation that I used to do and get very overwhelmed by like, okay, I want to pull and like, I don't quite get in. I keep pulling and then I'm like, wait, okay, now I have like 8 cards. And what am I supposed to like do building these connections? And so it can be really helpful to kind of like structure it out for yourself, give yourself a little bit of a game plan, or to have consistent questions that you ask and consistent ways that you build this practice. Especially if you are brand new to this practice, consistency can be really, really key. This doesn't mean you have to do something every day, but it could mean you do something every week, or you do something every month on the full or new moon, or you do something, that feels like a ritual of some kind, or it gives a rhythm. This feels like another relational building with spirit skill, where it feels like you are building a relationship and a commitment, and you're kind of saying like, hey, I'll meet you for our walk next week. And spirit can show up, and your guide can show up, and know to communicate. And you're also readying your own system, like your nervous system, your mind and your body and your spirit, to be present in that moment because you have that intention behind it. And intention can be incredibly powerful. So by intention, I just mean setting out like an idea of what you want from it, right? Or what you're doing there, right? Creating, the intention creates that container. So to summarize, these are 3 different ways that you can connect with your crystal skull or your crystal carving. The first one was taking a bath or a shower. The second one was going for a walk. And then the third one was either pulling cards or bibliomancy, using the tools at your disposal. This is the book that I just got in the mail that I'm excited to read, The Flowering Wand, and just kind of flipping to the page you feel guided to and reading from there. So I would love to know if these are not ways that you connect with your crystal skull, or if they are, but you have some other favorites. What are the ways that you connect with your crystal skulls or carvings? Let me know in the comments. I have lots of other ways that I do this. So if also none of these resonated with you or you tried them, maybe I'll make some other tips and tricks kind of thing of like other ways that I would suggest doing it. As always, thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.